Hey, it's Brian and Chris here again. And today, Chris found an article about cybersecurity deadlines that are coming up in 2024. A lot of this stuff has been put in place in the last year or two. Some of it may have gone into partial implementation the last few months, but mostly in 2024. Some of it is state, some of it is federal, and some of it is people who deal with credit cards, some are, public companies. So Chris has shed a little bit of light on this one. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so the first one they mentioned is March 31st, and it's the first compliance deadline for payment card industry data security standard. So PCI DSS 4.0. We got a few clients that actually, have to deal with this once a year. They do some sort of penetration test, and it's like checking their network, their firewall, what's communicating to what on the network. A lot of people, there's with PCI, there's the ability to just pay a fine and not be compliant. But a few times actually just last year we had a client where, whatever test they ran, it detected that they were using a VPN and that, there was no certificate. So we had to actually get a certificate and everything for that, for the, what we were doing with their VPN config. And then they were all set after that. They ran the test again and it checked out. But it's overwhelming to a lot of clients because some of the paperwork, documents, whatever you get from them might be like a 200 question questionnaire, asking various questions that a lot of clients don't have the answers to, that they need to rope in their IT people.
Yeah, so depending on the volume of credit cards and who your credit card processor is, in some cases, you know, you might not want to go through that whole process, but there are ways that you can lock down your network and things like that to avoid some of the like Chris said, hundreds of questions in some cases on PCI. But whatever you do, you do want to take security, whether it's required or not. You do want to have baseline securities in place, security on your network in place, aside from all these compliance rules. So, what's the other one, Chris?
So this one is a FTC amendment safeguards rule. So this is for non-banking financial institutions to report certain data breaches to the FTC as soon as possible, with put in quotes there. No later than 30 days after it's discovered. You know, there's a few times where it was reported months later, some uh, companies, but
So I noticed in that text it says this applies to mortgage brokers, payday lenders, and vehicle dealers. So if you own a dealership or you're in the mortgages industry, you're going to have to start tightening down. I mean, I've just seen it through the years. We see these different companies and some that we outright won't deal with because they're not interested in security, even the baseline security. So you can see that more and more of this stuff is coming to the front. The government is pushing all this stuff, whether it be federal or state. And it just makes sense you got to start somewhere, start putting all the security layers that you need in place. And policies are a big piece of this. Things that we've talked about in the past, Chris and I have talked about computer use policies and all the sort of things that you can do to your employees are a big piece of this. So, just secure your business. And then these compliance initiatives it won't bog you down so much. Okay, Chris, go ahead. What's one of the other ones?
some of the other ones is new state data privacy rules for Florida, Oregon, and Texas. The Florida one's a little, I don't think it's going to affect a lot of people, but for companies with greater than $1 billion and offer services like online advertising, app distribution. Oregon has another, a consumer privacy act as well for companies that process personal data of at least 100,000 residents of the state. They're just tightening down on data privacy for consumers because, breaches are rapidly occurring each and every week, pretty much.
So they're just falling in line with some of these other states, like not so much in New Hampshire, but eventually there's gonna be more in New Hampshire, just like all the, Texas and Florida, just like New Hampshire, we tend to be a little loosey-goosey. But if you go into Massachusetts, our next door neighbor, or Vermont or New York, they already have a lot of this in place, and it's more restrictive than what you're seeing here, what Chris is talking about. It's just going to happen across the board eventually. So again, just start the process, tighten up your security, and then these things aren't such a heavy lift. Okay, were there any others of interest in there?
Yeah, we could do a whole nother video on this, so we'll probably keep it short. But federal agencies need to achieve zero trust goals, which is
Oh,
zero
zero
trust, the
trust.
buzzword.
Zero trust. Yeah, it's a buzzword to us, like you got to be careful when you hear zero trust. But I mean, I guess the idea is, just it's a lot of common sense. Use multi-factor authentication. A lot of businesses are using that nowadays. Use um, sometimes in some cases, of course, strong passwords. Sometimes you might need to change passwords depending on the situation. It's all like pretty easy, low hurdle, low budget types of things. But they just tend to be a pain in the ass, right, Chris?
Yeah, depending on the organization, and they got a bunch of legacy software equipment, can be quite the challenge.
Yeah, so if you're in a legacy environment, this whole idea of zero trust can be a little bit more complex because it's not all in one container, if you will. Like if you go to Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, and most of your work is done on that platform, they have a lot of tools already that are built in that you can get to zero trust quicker than if you have on-premise equipment or hybrid equipment. Like a lot of our clients are hybrid, some stuff's in the cloud, some is on-premise, right? But it can be done either way. It just requires certain tools and processes to to get to that quote unquote zero trust stance.
Yeah, and I put it. This is a CrowdStrike article on some of the for the what some of the things they're looking for, like the zero trust policies. They're saying it relies heavily on real time visibility, user identity type of credential, human programmatic credential privileges of each device, connections, geolocations, firmware versions, operating system version and patch levels, applications installed on the endpoint, and then, something for a security incident, some kind of detection, whether you're using Huntress, all these, various security software to detect suspicious activity and recognize attacks, looking for things like suspicious protocols being used, RDPs being used to a server from some random workstation, things of that nature.
Thanks for pointing that out. I mean, look at things like geolocation. Like if you're using Microsoft 365, it's already built in, or it's a small fee to license us the ability to block certain countries and things like that, or firewalls, for example. It's built into the firewall. You can do that. Things we already do. Updating firmware on your hardware, right? Like your computer hardware, laptops, desktops, things like that. Operating system patching. This is all stuff that your IT people should be doing every month, month after month, week after week. They should be doing all this sort of stuff, and it's table stakes. And then you can put in some of the fancier products and things later on down the road to make it, I guess, more zero trust, if you will, right? But this is all table stake stuff, right? That Chris is talking about here.
Yeah, and they also mentioned some of the, who might benefit: multi-cloud, hybrid, multi-identity, unmanaged devices, legacy systems, SaaS apps. Some of the things to look out for, threats.
Yeah, so I think you nailed it there, Chris. I mean, this is a great great reminder, the zero trust stuff and all the compliance stuff that's coming down the pike. you know, it's gonna hit everybody eventually at some level, even the smallest of businesses. But you know, technology's getting cheaper too, cheaper to implement, cheaper to buy certain products if you do need a product. So yeah, invest in it and just know that it's coming. All right, Chris, thanks a lot.
Have a good one.
Take care.